The postgame. Growing up as a kid that primarily played Pokémon and little else, I didn't realize what a rarity it was for a video game to have proper post-game content. But as I've aged and ventured into more RPGs, Zelda, Xenoblade, Persona, Fire Emblem, and like 2 Final Fantasies, there's a lot of those, I began to realize just how unique Pokémon is in the sense that the adventure truly never ends. Sure, you defeat the evil team, become the champion, and then nothing of note ever really happens in that region ever again, but the game still continues because the mechanics of Pokémon make the game's content virtually infinite. Do all the post-game story? Well, then catch all the Pokémon. Oh, you have all the Pokémon? Then catch all the shinies. You have all the shinies? Haha, no you definitely don't, but if you do, then breed for competitive Pokémon to enter tournaments with. Have no tournaments nearby? Endlessly grind the battle tower. Or just go outside for crying out loud. Yes, despite being called the post-game, this is the part of the game that most dedicated Pokemon fans will actually spend 90% of their time in. But over the past couple generations, I've noticed one pretty significant shortcoming. And no, it's not the game's performance, or the Pokemon being cut, or the lack of new side content. Okay, there's a lot of significant shortcomings actually, but for the sake of this video, we're just talking about this one. But before we can address the fall of the post-game, first we have to discuss the rise. But unlike these Pokemon post-games, one thing that will never lose its quality is the sponsor of today's video, Holzkern. Ladies and gentlemen, the holiday season is upon us, and if you're struggling for gift ideas for friends, family, or significant others, kinda like me because I suck at giving gifts, then Holzkern has you covered. I have worked with Holzkern many times in the past, and that's because their exquisitely crafted watches just keep getting better. I wear this watch to social gatherings all the time to make myself look a little extra fancy, so if you have a father or a brother, then this is a wonderful gift idea for them. And they don't just make products for men. Holzkern also produces a wide array of jewelry for women, such as necklaces, earrings, and bracelets. In fact, I really hope my girlfriend isn't watching this video because it might spoil something for her. Holzkern's products are all made in small quantities to ensure that every item meets a high standard of quality and lasts you a very long time. And everything is made from natural materials, so no matter what you order, it will be truly unique. And it doesn't matter where in the world you're located, Holzkern offers free worldwide shipping straight from beautiful Vienna. Products typically arrive within 2 to 5 business days, and anything ordered before December 19th is guaranteed to arrive by Christmas Day. So don't wait, head to holzkern.com using my link in the description down below, and use my coupon code JPR to save 15% off your holiday gifts for a limited time. Not only will you be ordering a great gift, but you'll also be supporting the channel in the process. Thank you Holzkern for sponsoring the video and making the holiday season just a little bit better for everybody. Back to the video. In the first Pokemon titles, there was actually very little in the way of post-game content. Well, aside from those 4 little letters literally written on the box, gotta catch 'em all. This wasn't just the game's catchy slogan, it was literally the end goal of the original games. In fact, never at any point does Professor Oak or any other adult tell you to fight the Mafia and collect gym badges and become the greatest trainer. That all just sort of happens along the way. Catching all 150 Pokemon, or 151 if you want to be fancy about it, is the goal. And it's something that's unlikely to be accomplished in the main campaign alone. Actually, it's literally impossible because you can't even catch Mewtwo until after the League. But yeah, the first real post-game content the series had to offer was in the second generation with Gold and Silver. And man, what a jump it was. There's almost as much post-game content here as there is in the main campaign. Heck, there's so much that most people say that the best thing about Johto is just getting back to Kanto. Ignoring the fact that being able to fit 2 regions into one Game Boy Color cartridge is an absolute technical marvel in itself, Gold and Silver truly set the standard for post-game content in Pokemon. Maybe a little too early though, because I feel like we haven't gotten this much ever again. And in case that wasn't enough, Crystal also went and added a Pokemon staple, the Battle Tower. Even though if I'm being completely honest, I never really cared for this place unless it was part of the Battle Frontier. But the Battle Tower just doubled down the idea that Pokemon is truly an infinite game. If you just want to battle until the end of time and do nothing else, you can do it here. Also, somehow the Battle Tower ended up being like the only post-game content we got in Ruby and Sapphire, and I do not know how that happened. It was like Game Freak said, oh, you guys actually wanted more of that stuff we did in Gen 2? Oh, we only planned on doing that once, oops. But hey, nobody cares because Pokemon Emerald gave us the Battle Frontier. All is forgiven. Starting in Gen 4 though, we enter what I like to call the golden age of post-game content. And I think it's a large part of the reason why so many fans look back on the DS games so fondly now. Even Diamond and Pearl, which have like one of the most dooky main campaigns of any Pokemon game, maybe the dookiest, I feel like people kinda overlook it because there's so much post-game content. Although those games do have that stupid restriction where you have to see all the Pokemon in the Sinnoh Dex before you can get your National Pokedex and actually start the post-game, 10-year-old me had to go buy one of those strategy guide books from GameStop because I didn't know how in the heck you were supposed to find Luminion. It's a money-making conspiracy, I tell you! But yeah, these games, Platinum, Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Black and White, Black 2 and White 2, all of these games are absolutely packed to the brim with post-game content. Sinnoh's got this whole entire island up here. They got tons of legendaries to find. I mean, new legendaries, not recycled ones like all the new games have. There's another Battle Frontier, infinite rival rematches, and there's an entire storyline revolving around Stark Mountain and Team Galactic. Black and White has all of Eastern Unova to explore, new areas open up like Challenger's Cave and the Royal Unova. There's the Sages and Looker storyline. You can actually go back and fight Alder. You can grind to fight Cynthia. And Black 2 and White 2 has almost all of this, plus the PWT, White Tree Hollow, and Black Skyscraper, End's Castle Returns. These titles seriously contend with Heart Gold and Soul Silver when it comes to sheer amount of post-game content. If you put me on a deserted island with nothing but a DS, a copy of Heart Gold, and a copy of White 2, you would also probably need to give me a charger and electricity because I'm going to be playing these games for a while. X and Y sees a bit of a regression when it comes to post-game content, but for the most part, it's still pretty decent. These games don't give you a whole new portion of the region to explore like the Johto, Sinnoh, and Unova-based games did, but they do have the Looker missions, the Megastone collecting, and the Battle Maison. It may not be as interesting post-game content as the DS titles, but there's still a lot to do here. I'm also convinced that the reason why Game Freak made shiny hunting so much easier to do starting in this gen is because they genuinely see shiny hunting as just as important of a post-game activity as the battle facilities or anything related to the story. Sun and Moon followed suit, also having some Looker missions and unlocking a portion of Pony Island, but not too much else. Gen 6 and 7 also decided to make the post-game stories into proper episodes, like the Delta episode, the Ultra Beast episode, and the Rainbow Rocket episode. I think this approach to post-game content was definitely decent. I kinda prefer finding this stuff on my own, like End's Castle in Black 2 and White 2, or Red on Mount Silver. I feel like that makes the post-game feel like it has more mystique. It makes you want to double-check every area in the game to make sure you didn't miss anything, instead of it all just being presented to you in a neat little 2-hour bundle of story. I don't know, there's pros and cons, but both ways are good, I would say. But the biggest problem here is that starting in X and Y, Game Freak stopped giving us entirely new areas designed for the post-game. Whether it was the entire region of Kanto, the Sevi Islands, the Battle Area, or Eastern Unova, they always excelled in creating new, interesting areas to explore. Kyloud City and half of Pony Island just don't have that same oomph to it. Now, if X and Y is where I started getting concerned about post-games, then Sword and Shield is where I accepted their death. While these games do have the whole epilogue with Swordward and Shieldbert, unfortunately, post-game really just boils down to the Battle Tower and collecting all the rare League cards, I guess. Beyond that, there is virtually nothing to do. And that's because starting in this generation, Game Freak would basically start selling us post-game content in the form of DLC, as both Sword and Shield and the Gen 9 games of Scarlet and Violet later came with a 2-part expansion. Part 1 of both DLCs is a little weird though. They're designed more as supplemental content to the main story than post-game material, as evidenced by the abundance of unevolved Pokemon and the levels being drastically lower if you start the DLC before entering the Hall of Fame. Part 2 of these DLCs, being the Crown Tundra and Indigo Disc, serve more as the actual post-game content, with more challenging fights, higher level Pokemon, and usually a wide array of legendaries to hunt down. Now I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure how I feel about the DLC model so far. Part 1 of both DLCs had me feeling pretty meh, and both Part 2s I definitely enjoyed a lot more. So before we get trot off to the comments to say that all I ever do is complain about modern Pokemon, let me be abundantly clear. I liked the Crown Tundra, and I liked the Indigo Disc. But what makes this argument so tricky is the fact that DLC hasn't just replaced the post-game content, but it has also replaced the dreaded third version games. Now admittedly, a lot of us, myself included, look back on these third version games with rose-tinted glasses because they are the definitive, most replayable versions of those regions. When talking about Hoenn or Sinnoh, I always talk about how much I love Emerald and Platinum. It's never about the duo of games that preceded them. I feel like third version games are always hated whenever they're announced or released, and then people quickly stop talking about them, and then 10 years later, everybody loves them because they don't remember getting scammed for $40 more. Because, let's face it, enhanced versions were basically just them saying, hey guys, you want some more Pokemon? Well, here's the same game you just played, but we actually finished it this time. So on one hand, I am glad that the DLC model exists. I think the content that you get from the DLC is definitely worth the $30 you have to spend, but at the same time, I hate that it has to come at the expense of actual post-game content. Like, the core games are going to be $60 no matter what, maybe even $70 in the Switch 2 because that's just the way the video games are nowadays. And no amount of moaning and groaning is ever going to change that fact. What I don't like is that my $60 game comes with less content in it than Black and White on the DS. And then after spending another $30, then it arguably has a similar amount of content. The only real positive is that we erased an enhanced version along the way, but even then, the DLC can't do everything an enhanced version was able to do. One of the nicest things about having enhanced versions, as slimy as they were, was that if there was something really not great about the main story, then it had an opportunity to change it. DLC is just additional content, it doesn't refine or fix anything wrong with the main story. Like the Scarlet and Violet main campaign we got is the one we're keeping. It will never be improved upon. Also, DLC argument aside, there are some very basic things that just ought to be a part of every Pokemon postgame. Such as gym leader rematches, rival rematches, rematches with anybody, honestly. Thankfully, this is something the Scarlet and Violet actually did right. You can rematch every gym leader, every team star leader, every rival/friendly character, and even school teachers and Gita through the Ace Academy tournament. Though, oddly, it's the only Elite Four you can't rematch, at least until the Blueberry Academy came along. Though, if I'm being honest, I think the only reason Scarlet and Violet made sure to include all of these rematches is because there is literally nothing else to do outside the DLC. No, Area Zero's first visit and the AI professor don't count, the credits literally don't roll until after it, I don't care if it happens after the league. Another thing that would be a nice time killer is some sort of side activity. Like, let's be honest, most of us didn't do Pokemon contests or Pokestar Studios or Pokeathlon during the main story. Those were all things we completed in the post-game. Though if I'm being completely honest, I never finished Pokestar Studios. That was maybe the one thing from Black 2 and White 2 that I was never really interested in. Ever since Kalos, we really haven't had one of these neat side career activity thingies. Doesn't Game Freak know that every Gen Zer needs a second job to do? Really, a good Pokemon postgame relies on 4 pillars. A handful of new areas to explore that are free, not paid DLC, some side activity to go back and complete, or at least a battle facility, which Scarlet and Violet surprisingly never received, rematches with most, if not all, NPCs, and a somewhat satisfying and fulfilling legendary Pokemon hunt. But since Generation 6, every single game seems to be missing at least one of these pillars, more often than not, multiple of them. But unfortunately, this is a problem I don't see any real solution to. While I've outlined what I think would make for an ideal Pokemon postgame, at this point, I think we just have to accept that the bulk of postgame content is just going to be sold to us as DLC until the end of time. Unless it's a game like Legends Arceus, which actually does have a pretty decent postgame, even if it is just crammed all into one storyline. It still lacks any new areas to explore, which is its biggest shortcoming, but I think it just reaffirms that DLC is always going to be the biggest enemy of postgame content. Again, I think there are pros and cons of the DLC model, at least we avoid enhanced versions now, but the side effects certainly can't be ignored. So what are your thoughts? Are you willing to give up on post-game content for DLC, or do you prefer the old way of doing things? Let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you again to Holzkern for sponsoring this video. Be sure to check those guys out using my link down below, and I'll see you guys next time.